Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, September 25th, 2023. Larry Johnson joins us now. Before we talk about the Canadian Parliament and President Zelenskyy honoring an ex-SS stormtrooper in the Canadian Parliament, I just want to ask some big picture questions because of some emails that I got before the sun came up this morning from our mutual friend, Ray McGovern, and I know you want to weigh in on this. Why do you think, according to polls, most Americans would support a hot war, not a proxy war, an actual war with Russia?
They've attended too many showings of Top Gun, watched too many Hollywood movies. I mean, candidly, they have no concept of the kind of devastation the United States would face, because any kind of U.S. military attack on Russia is going to be reciprocated. And Russia has the ability through submarines, and not using nuclear tipped missiles, they can use conventional explosives, but they can hit every city in the United States if they want. And so the United States, we've lived with this illusion, this fantasy for over 200 years that we can't be attacked. The last significant attack in the United States was in the War of 1812. So the United States has never had to deal with the issue of a foreign invading force that's armed and killing Americans. The Russians have. And the Russians have done it repeatedly over, 300-400 years. So the Russians are accustomed to that, and the United States would be facing some of that same medicine if we try to go down this path. It's terribly stupid.
Can you attribute this consensus amongst Americans to the CIA and the propagandists, in addition to a fortunate history that so we have no experience with it?
Well, I don't think it's...
Our friend Ray McGovern says that Fiona Hill and her buddies in the intelligence community have been beating the drum for this for generations.
Right. No, that's true. But Fiona Hill and the others, they come out of Department of Defense. And in fact, I was just reading the new cybersecurity report of the Department of Defense. And, the United States government has become more active in cyber activities, which includes propaganda, getting onto social media, planting false stories, convincing Americans, as you see many commentators saying, oh, Russia is losing, Ukraine is winning, Russia is retreating. And when that message is constantly repeated throughout a variety of social media, whether it's Facebook or X, formerly known as Twitter, or Instagram or TikTok, it starts becoming part of people start saying, yeah, that's what I believe. In fact, when I've had occasions where I try to tell people the opposite, they look at me like I got three heads.
The CIA's attitude toward President Putin, Larry, would you describe it as hatred? Would you describe it as fear or as something else?
I'm not sure there is one agreed upon point of view, because, Cy Hirsch has been reporting correctly. There's a split within CIA. So you have some who demonize Putin, that there is nothing good or positive about Putin. He's cast in the same light as Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler, Pol Pot. That nobody will step back and take an objective look at him. But there are a few who try. The problem with that is once the narrative is set, anybody who tries to counter that narrative not only can be shut down, can actually be fired or taken off the account or shunted aside. So there is cancel culture inside the CIA as well.
Last week, in the editorial pages of the Wall Street Journal, John Ratcliffe, who was the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence for the last 18 months of President Trump's term in office, and in a different piece, but on our show, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University made the following argument. Now, this has to do with COVID. We're not going to get into the
Right,
virology of COVID, but it's the CIA. They both said the same thing, and that is that the CIA bribed certain analysts who were examining the origins of COVID to change the results of their examination of their research so as to conform to a preconceived government narrative. Do you have any reason to believe that that happened? And if so, is this standard? Does the CIA bribe its own employees?
Judge, you're taking the wrong view on this. We have the best intelligence money can buy. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's true. It sounds. I never experienced that while I was there. Boy, I wish I had. I wish.
McGovern said the same thing. Boy, I wish they put that money in my pocket.
Yeah, I'll say.
I'm
Okay, here
paraphrasing.
we're gonna pay you to lie, and that's unfortunate. But we've seen.
It's one thing, I think, and correct me if you have a different view, for the CIA spinmeisters to take raw data and spin it so that the Oval Office hears what they want to hear. It's another thing for CIA management to bribe somebody on an international commission to change the results of their research. Bribe.
Well,
Hey,
yeah,
cash.
there have been instances in the past. I was witness indirectly to one in which an analyst who had written something about Nelson Mandela was being pressured by Bob Gates, who was then the director of intelligence at CIA, to say the exact opposite. Now, Gates didn't offer him money to change his position, and the analyst, whose first name was John, refused to budge. And to the analyst's credit, he resisted the efforts of management. But it sounds like there's a whole different crew of management in now, and more let's call them politically pliant analysts below.
So last week, when Vladimir Zelenskyy was here on the East Coast, when he spoke to the General Assembly, 2/3 of the UN, 2/3 of the seats were empty.
Yeah, at least.
After he spoke, right there on the East River, just where the UN is located, President Duda of Poland compared Ukraine to a drowning swimmer, so dangerous that lifeguards wouldn't save him because he might pull the lifeguards down. A pretty lurid analogy.
Right.
When President Zelenskyy went to D.C., begged Kevin McCarthy to convene a joint session of Congress and let him speak. Speaker McCarthy said, no, you can only speak to us in private, which he did to the House and to the Senate. And then Joe Biden apparently whispered into his ear, we're going to give you these ATACMS, these longer range artillery. A bad week for him, I think, by any objective standard. And yet, let me play for you a clip of him yesterday speaking to the Ukrainian people when he returned from the United States.
There is a historic decision by the United States to jointly produce weapons and defense systems, in particular, air defense. This is something that was an absolute fantasy until recently, but it will become a reality. We will make it a reality. I held very important meetings in Washington in Congress, both parties, both houses, and we specifically requested a format of meetings and communication in Congress that would allow for the most detailed conversation. This resulted in more trust, and I heard that support for Ukraine will persist.
I heard that support for Ukraine will persist. He must have heard it when Chuck Schumer bowed and said, we're in your corner.
Yeah. No, the meetings didn't go that well for Zelenskyy. You remember, he didn't get a joint press conference with Joe Biden either.
Right.
That said, the United States, through mouthpieces like Jake Sullivan and some members of Congress, continued to insist that we're not backing off, and Biden crossed two red lines. Not only did he agree to provide some ATACMS and these air tactical missiles that had the potential to travel 190 miles, That's something that Biden in the past said was a red line. The reason they didn't want to provide him in the past, they feared it risked expanding the war and that Russia would retaliate and attack the United States. So that's why they didn't do it in the past. Now they're going to do it, which means they're taking a greater risk. Remember, the second thing that came out of that is Biden offered to provide an inspector general now.
Well, something the Congress wasn't even allowed to vote on when Rand Paul and Thomas Massey proposed it.
Yeah, so they reversed that in order to, I think, buy some support from Republicans in order to continue funding this war. But Zelenskyy did not get the public adulation that he had received in the past, where he got to get kissed by Nancy Pelosi, which that may be a human rights violation in my book. but he didn't get the joint session of Congress either. And the criticism, the relations with Poland, they've gotten even rockier since he was here.
Yeah, I understand that the president of Poland is the titular head of state. It wasn't the prime minister. I understand that there are Polish elections on October 15th, and the Polish farmers are up in arms about Ukrainian grain, and this may have been said for Polish domestic political consumption, but it was a pretty lurid analogy. And he gave it right outside the UN, either minutes before or minutes after Zelenskyy was giving this internationally televised address.
No, absolutely. And in fact, when Zelenskyy going back to Ukraine, he stopped off in Poland to give pinned some medals on some Polish volunteers. Not a single senior Polish politician and government figure would meet with him, would be seen in public with him. And so that's why I'm saying that wasn't a one-off with Duda. That wasn't just a staged event at the UN, one time, and then they're going to go back to business as normal. There's a real rift that's now developed between Poland and Ukraine, and that's going to have some significant implications for the ability of the United States to continue to arm Ukraine going forward.
We're going to take a break in a minute, but one last question about Poland. Is the 101st Airborne still there? There's still 40,000 American troops training with 90,000 Polish troops at the Polish-Ukraine border? Or are the Americans back in Germany?
I don't know if the 101st or the 82nd, but the 101st and 82nd are deployed in Poland and Romania. And I think that the total troop count on that, I think, is closer to 20,000, not 40,000. But it's still, you have U.S. troops present. And then we can talk later about the reports that a German actual Bundeswehr 4 guys were killed in a tank inside Ukraine.
Wow. We'll get to that in a minute. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we will talk about the standing ovation for a Nazi SS officer in the Canadian Parliament last week with President Zelenskyy. In fact, we'll show you a clip of this happening. But first, this. Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Lear Capital. You all know that I am a paid spokesperson for Lear Capital because it's the right thing to do, because the government is regulating too much and printing too much money and reducing the value of everything you earn and everything you own. And the best hedge against this is gold and silver. That's what I've done. I know the folks at Lear. I trust the folks at Lear. I've worked with the folks at Lear, and I use their advice when it comes to my investing in gold and silver. You should do the same. Call them at 800-511-4620 or go to learjudgenap.com. You'll have a very nice conversation with a very knowledgeable person who'll send you literature to read, which you can review with your spouse and your financial advisor, and then you can call them back and decide what you want to do. Why Lear? Lear has 25 years experience and thousands of 5-star reviews and a 24-hour risk-free guarantee. And when you have this conversation with the Lear representative, you'll find out if you can qualify for a $15,000 gold bonus. So call Lear now, 800-511-4620 or learjudgenap.com. All right, since a picture is worth 1,000 words, let's play this picture. There's an English narration, and then you can tell us who this person is and what the heck was going on. This is a scene from the Canadian Parliament. It doesn't look like the American Congress. in order to see President Putin, he's on very briefly all the way to the left of your screen at the very beginning of the clip.
Zelensky's speech received at least a dozen standing ovations. There was also one for this man, a 98-year-old Ukrainian Canadian who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians during the Second World War.
Who is that Ukrainian Canadian, and why are people like you and I who know who he is furious at this?
Yeah, I think his name's Yaroslav Honka. He was a member of the Waffen SS battalion that was set up in Ukraine under the supervision of the Nazi Gauleiter. The Gauleiter was the guy in charge over all Ukraine. His name was von Wachter. He had recommended Himmler that they form an SS battalion, a unit that would operate like the SS does. Now, remember, we're not talking normal German army, the Bundeswehr, the Wehrmacht. We're talking the SS, who had to pledge personal loyalty to Adolf Hitler. They had tattoos under their armpits that helped identify them after the war. So this guy was not some run-of-the-mill soldier who was pressed into service. He embraced Adolf Hitler. And then to listen to that obscene commentary by that reporter that he joined the SS to fight the Russians, and have no memory of the history of Canada in World War II, that Russia, the Soviets, were an ally of Canada and Britain and the United States, and that we were fighting the Nazis for good reason, because they were a tyrannical, murderous organization.
Gary, run the clip again, please.
Zelensky's speech received at least a dozen standing ovations. There was also one for this man, a 98-year-old Ukrainian Canadian who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians during the Second World War.
I know Prime Minister Trudeau is a lunatic.
Yeah.
I know he's an authoritarian. But why this? Why inject Nazism into the visit of Zelenskyy to Ottawa?
Well, I mean, this is not just Trudeau doing this. Did you see what Boris Johnson did? He offered some commentary that it was Ukraine that defeated the Nazis. And Johnson, I'm told, wrote a book on Churchill, not a very good book and not very well written, but to have this kind of now historical revisionism going on, and it's all being done for one reason. Ukraine is losing the war. The West is desperate to try to figure out how to put some lipstick on this pig, and no matter how much they paint it, it's not going to look any better.
Cy Hirsch, whom you and I, and I think almost everybody watching us now respects, reports that Russia is producing 170,000 artillery shells a month, 170,000. The United States, about 15% of that. Do the math. How much longer is this going to last?
Yeah, well, and note that the United States is saying that, okay, we're going to be producing 2 million rounds by the end of 2025. Well, Russia's already producing close to 2 million, over 2 million a year. It's probably actually higher, and they're going to be at 4 million. So the United States is never going to catch up. And part of the reason is we don't have the industrial base in this country. It's not like you flip a light switch and the lights come on. You can't just press a button and all of a sudden you got a factory that's churning out these artillery shells. Just getting the basics of the explosives that you need to put inside those shells has been problematic.
And still, Joe Biden, Jake Sullivan, Mrs. Newland want us to believe that Secretary Austin, Tony Blinken want us to believe that the Ukrainians are marching forward. And now I'm going to quote Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, and it may have been Mitt Romney, Senator Romney of Utah, the best defense investment we ever made, because we're killing Russians and no Americans are dying.
Yeah, and I don't think they even understand the concept of an investment. An investment's supposed to be something that gives you actually a return on your money, that is going to grow in value. This doesn't grow in value. So what this does is this puts Americans at risk. This risks destroying the lives and property of Americans. And to so foolishly embrace this. But, we're seeing, I think you may recall the concept of groupthink. It came out of a book written by, I think the man was Irving Janis, back in 1971, 72. And it's how you get seemingly very smart people, educated people, who will come together and seize upon an idea that's so completely false, so completely out of touch with reality, and you can't do anything to shake them off of that. That's what we're witnessing right now, Judge.
Before we part for the day, is there a report this morning of Germans, either civilians or military, killed in Ukraine?
Yeah, it actually came out on Saturday, and it's been reported. It was, I think, first reported in Germany. It's been picked up in both Turkey and India. But the Russians hit a Leopard tank. When they approached the Leopard tank, they recovered. There was one survivor saying "Nicht schießen, nicht schießen," which in German means "Don't shoot, don't shoot." And it turned out these were not volunteers. These were not mercenaries. These were actual members, according to the report, of the German army, which means this would be this brings NATO directly into the conflict. I mean, the reality is NATO's already directly involved just by the provision of some of the weapon systems that are being used to attack Russian territory. So that's what I fear we're going to see over the next 2 or 3 months, is the growing risk that this is going to escalate. It's going to spread beyond just the war, the fighting that's going on in the Donetsk, Luhansk Republic, Zaporizhia, that it could very well spread into Poland and maybe Germany.
Wow. Bad stuff, but thank you for monitoring it for us, Larry. Thank you for your time. We'll look forward to seeing you on Friday with that youngster McGovern.
Okay, Judge. Thanks for having me.
All the best. More as we get it. Of course, Phil Giraldi on the latest spying and lying at 3:30 this afternoon, and our usual wonderful guests throughout the week. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. What we do at Judging Freedom, we look out for your liberty.